I was on my 285th combat mission, and you always think that, well, it's always going to happen to the other guy. Well, suddenly it was happening to me.
All of a sudden, there was a bunch of little golf balls coming by my canopy.
And about that time, the airplane blew up.
Then I'm running out of altitude.
I come back, or I get killed. You know, we just forgot all about this stuff in the middle.
I'm a product of naval aviation, and now I'm a part of naval aviation history. And I'm proudest that when push came to shove and the chips were down, I could apply it and come through and return with honor just like everybody else.
4 remarkable men, representing the 179 Naval Aviator Vietnam prisoners of war who fought bravely and endured captivity in defense of their nation. Will Abbott, Ev Southwick, Bill Stark, and Jack Inch. Collectively, these 4 flew more than 500 combat missions, survived 5,000 days in captivity, and helped establish a legacy of honor and courage unique in American history.
You don't realize what you can accomplish or what you can put up with until you're faced with it.
Ev Southwick was in Vietnam from the beginning. In August 1964, his F-4 Phantom lit into North Vietnamese PT boats attacking the USS Maddox in international waters. 1 week later, the Congressional Gulf of Tonkin Resolution authorized an American military response that would ultimately lead to war and include aircraft carriers conducting more than 80 wartime deployments, the USS Midway prominent among them.
After I left B-53 in the summer of '64, I went to the Bureau of Naval Personnel on officer distribution. Of the 14 naval aviators or naval flight officers, 6 of us ended up in Hanoi, and 1 of them was killed. We all wrote our orders back to the war. Be careful what you ask for.
Flying into the teeth of sophisticated enemy air defenses, more than 500 naval aircraft were lost in combat between 1965 and 1973.
Mike Doyle and I were flying together, and luckily I'm not superstitious because we were on our 13th mission together that day. We got taken under fire by a number of surface-to-air missile batteries.
I was hit right in the canopy. Probably took a 23 millimeter right in the head there because I kind of was unconscious maybe for a few seconds. I ejected. My right leg is sticking up like that, foot sticking out like that, and it was pretty clearly that it was broken. And then it's all tangled up in the shroud lines up there so the parachute wouldn't open.
The next thing I remembered was hanging in my chute, and both elbows had been dislocated and pushed halfway up my arm. I'm floating down in a parachute with no helmet, looking at people on the ground shooting at me. I thought, oh my God, you know, this is it, I'm gone. Yeah, but luckily they were either bad shots or I wasn't in the air long enough, and I ended up in the Hanoi Hilton.
I did 43 missions from Enterprise. On the 43rd one, our aircraft was struck with a SAM, surface-to-air missile. I was blown out of the aircraft, and when I recovered consciousness, I was on the ground. I'm aching some with a broken leg, a broken knee, and a broken arm. And the first English I had heard from any of the Vietnamese was, "For you, the war is over." They were wrong. The war continued. And now my war became one with my captors. Everyone got the initial torture session. Name, rank, serial number, date of birth. That went fine. The 4th question, what ship are you from? And I didn't answer. Slaps and kicks, and cuffed up alongside the head.
We called them quizzes, you know, and I wouldn't say anything, and the guard would come over and kick me off stool, back onto the concrete. And this routine went on for the next 3.5 days, around the clock.
And finally, I got to the point where I couldn't handle it anymore. They weren't going to kill me. And I said, okay, I'll tell you. I'm from the Kitty Hawk, which was an obvious lie. They knew it to be an obvious lie. They didn't need the answer to that question. They could hand me my butt on a tray. And that was the purpose, to beat me down for future sessions. And so began what ended up being almost 6 years, not just in the Hanoi Hilton, but in outlying camps.
The Hanoi Hilton, Dogpatch, Dirty Bird, and the ironically named Camp Hope, plus 9 more North Vietnamese prison camps in which simple survival was the goal. And the Geneva Accords were a myth.
One of the things that we lived on over there was the belief that our country would never abandon us. That was certainly a value that you had that carried you through.
Unless you've been there and done it, it's hard to explain to someone what kind of bonds you build with people. One of the things that helped us get through the POW experience was the mutual support and relationships that we had within the camp, and one guy helping another get through.
Your love of your country, the love and confidence you have in your family, you know, and that carries you through a lot of things.
We know what's happening to us, and because we're experiencing it. But the families at home, they can only imagine.
My wife knew I had been captured, but she didn't know what had happened to me for 3 years. She had the tough role. I knew where I was, and I knew what I was called upon to do. You're looking for heroes in our family? She's the hero.
On the home front, families waited and worked. In 1966, members of a local support group formed the National League of Families of American Prisoners Missing in Southeast Asia.
My wife was in that first group of wives that met with Sybil Stockdale. My wife went back to school. She was getting herself prepared to deal with their life on her own.
By the end of 1972, Will Abbott had been imprisoned for 6 years and 4 months. But peace negotiations were beginning to deliver results.
In that day, in early January of 1973, they opened the door, they put us back into the trucks, no cuffs, no blindfolds, but we knew we were going home.
On February 12, 1973, Operation Homecoming commenced, the final major action of America's war in Vietnam.
Walked us out through the Heartbreak Hotel. Across the street, a lot of Vietnamese people. They weren't throwing flowers as Ho Chi Minh predicted they would do on the day that we left Vietnam, but they weren't throwing anything else either.
We crossed the Vietnamese coast on the way to Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines, and the pilot came across the intercom and he said, "We are exiting Vietnam airspace, and we're now in international airspace over the Tonkin Gulf." And the plane just erupted. I mean, we just went crazy. The real heroes are the ones that didn't come back. And there are heroes too, that guys that went over there and served and came back and got no thanks whatsoever.
We don't look upon ourselves as being heroes by any stretch of the imagination. But when we came home, the war was so divisive in this country that I think Americans were looking for some heroes, and we filled the bill. We were overwhelmed, absolutely overwhelmed.
I went back to Hanoi. Hanoi had not changed a great deal in those times, and all that has served to enforce in me the unassailable conclusion that we're damn lucky to be where we are.
Ev Southwick would return too, but with a twist. His most improbable story began on that spring day in 1967 as he fought to control his stricken F-4.
We were not going to quite make it, and I'm swapping altitude for airspeed all the way down, and I finally scream at Jack. I said, "Okay, Jack, get out, get out." airplane just keeps on going, and it lands, mind you, on a sandbar. And it just sat there until the early 1980s. And then they said, hey, maybe we could haul that thing up to Hanoi and put it in a museum.
And so they did. In 2004, 3 decades after he left Vietnam, Ev Southwick was back in Hanoi to visit a museum.
I've never hated the Vietnamese people, for goodness sakes. It's the system that, totalitarian system. It can never succeed because it doesn't utilize the creativity and the potential that all human beings have.
The smallest jail cell in the world is right here. If you continue to keep hating and dwelling on that like that, you're still a prisoner up here. And the Lord's Prayer says what? Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those. And so, well, it was good enough for Jesus. I guess it's good enough for Jack Inch. The POW experience was a part of my life. It wasn't the end of my life. I came home and I had a life.
I went back to sea on, of all ships, the Kitty Hawk. And I took with me the feeling that I'm damn lucky. I am damn lucky. Number one, to have survived. Number two, to have prevailed. And number three, to continue to do what I want to do within my capabilities.
I came back and got to get back in the cockpit and continue my aviation career. Got to be associated with a rather famous military outfit called Top Gun, where I was there for 2.5 years as the executive officer. Got to come home and see my 3 daughters grow up, go to college, and get married.
Ev Southwick would graduate from law school and then serve a final tour before legal roles in industry and with NASA. After his wartime service as an exchange officer with the United States Navy, Will Abbott returned to the U.S. Air Force, ultimately commanding the 21st Fighter Wing. When Bill Stark retired from the Navy, he worked in banking, and then in 1986 commenced yet another extraordinary career.
I was a harbor police officer here on San Diego Bay. Worked as a senior volunteer for the Coronado Police as an investigator. Did that for 10 years. And then I thought, I need to do something different. That's when I found the Midway.
Today, these 4 amazing men continue their service to America as docents aboard the USS Midway. Their very presence underscoring our vision to become America's living symbol of freedom.
I did 2 cruises on Midway, which I didn't complete it all. I took a set of unaccompanied shore duty orders about 3/4 of the way through that cruise. I have 1 more cat shot than I have landing on the Midway because I didn't come back for my last mission. She still owes me one.
Captain Inch, we owe you one. Tonight, to celebrate the commitment, sacrifice, and dedication of all Naval Aviator Vietnam prisoners of war, we are proud to honor Will Abbott, Ev Southwick, Bill Stark, and Jack Inch as co-recipients of the 2017 Midway American Patriot Award.